I couldn't let the Halloween season go by without creating an apothecary for you guys. And this one is a coffin apothecary. And for the doors, I have these two ravens that open up. They're on hinges that open up and show you the apothecary inside. Now, you could perhaps find a paper mache coffin in your local craft store or maybe online, but after looking around when I decided I wanted to make a coffin apothecary, I found that they were very, very difficult to find, and even the folks at Alpha Stamps were going to try to carry some for me, but the manufacturer isn't making them anymore. So with that in mind, I thought, you know what, why don't I just go ahead and make a pattern for the apothecary, and that way you can make as many as you want and you don't have to worry about trying to find one. So what I've done here is I have a sheet. Now this will be on my blog. You'll be able to download this and print it as your pattern for the coffin. So I will have this two ways for you. One is I'll have just the sheet that you can download and print it out, and that will give you a 7-inch coffin. Or I will also give you the individual pieces that you can download. That way, if you want to size this to make a larger coffin, you can do that and still be able to print the pieces out on multiple 8.5 by 11 sheet. As you can see, really the decision about the 7 inches had more to do with making sure that I could fit the whole pattern on one 8.5 by 11 sheet and didn't have to split it up. So, so of course, if you want to make a smaller one, and I have a future project that's going to be on the blog where I actually downsize this and use it for another purpose, then you can just shrink. You can take the sheet and shrink it to whatever you want. Or like I said, you can take the individual pieces and make them larger or smaller, whatever you want to do. The only thing to keep in mind is if you do change the size of this, change everything proportionally. So if you change it, if you make it 50% smaller, you have to make it 50% smaller horizontally and vertically. So, and the same with every piece. You need to make, you need to reduce each piece the exact same size and proportionately, so that everything will still fit together. So let's start. The first thing you'll want to do is obviously print out your pattern, your pieces, that sort of thing. And then you'll want to glue these onto heavy chipboard. And you can see I've got them, the pieces done here. I just rough cut them, I glued them on the board and then cut them out. And let me show you what I mean by heavy chipboard. The sample that I first worked with to see, you know, kind of figure everything out, I used very, very thin chipboard, and it just wasn't thick enough to support it. You know, if you're going to be opening it and closing it and touching it and all that kind of stuff, I just didn't feel like it was strong enough. If you don't have heavy chipboard, obviously you could glue together one or two or three pieces, say, of the thin chipboard. But this heavy chipboard that I used is about the thickness of a penny, maybe even just slightly, but it's relatively stiff, as you can see here. And that seemed to give it enough support and give you a really nice sturdy coffin. So after you cut this out, and I would suggest cutting right to the edge of the blue line. It's better to cut this a little large than to cut it too small, because you can always trim stuff off, but of course you can't add things back. So if you cut it right to the edge of the blue line, and I use a pair of heavy scissors, it's one of the Tim Holtz type scissors, that cuts through this chipboard pretty easily. But you know, if you get to a point where you're cutting it and you're not like completely straight, you know, you can always come in with a piece of sandpaper and just sand everything up and get it, you know, nice and smooth if there's any little snags, or get it right close to the line. So you can always do that. So like I say, better to cut it a little big and then, you know, sand it or trim it. Or you could also trim it as you put the coffin together as well. So once you get all your pieces cut out, now you can cover some of these with decorative paper or paint them or whatever you're going to do. One of the nice things about assembling your own coffin is that it's easier to get the paper on it as opposed to working with something that's already fixed and you're trying to get the paper inside. So the things that you'll want to paper is you want to focus on the inside of the coffin, and the inside of the coffin is going to be the paper, or the side that has the template on it. So that's easier for you to understand what you're going to cover with paper. Actually, I think it's like this. So what you're going to want to do is, if you're going to paper this or paint it, do all the inside. So the side bottoms, the side tops, the bottom of your coffin, and the top of your coffin, all of the inside pieces. The top and the bottom, you can also do the outside as well. And in this particular case, you can see that I have one paper on the outside, and I have chosen a different paper for the inside, and I'll talk to you about that. So now I've got paper on, for this part, I've got paper just on the inside. You can see for here, the coffin, for this part right here. For the top and the bottom, I've done both sides. And then I've done both sides of the shelves. Now for the sample, the original sample here, the papers I'm using are the Graphic 45, an Eerie Tail. And this set is nice because it comes with some light colors and some dark colors, so you can kind of go, if you want more bright Halloween colors, or if you want more spooky gothic colors, it kind of has both of those colors in here. And for the sample for the outside, I used this paper. And for the inside, I used the stripe. And then the shelves, I used this one. And I like to use the lighter colors on the inside, because that way the stuff that you put inside pops against those colors. And yes, there really is a thunderstorm going on. It's not just the intro, it's actually going on right now. And so the second one I'm going to make with some of the other papers. I'm still going to use the lighter one, like the owl and the one that I used on the shelves there. But for the outside, I'm going to use the green bats, the green and black bat paper. Now, once you get to this step, this is the point at which, if you're going to put doors on your apothecary, you want to do the hinging now. It's the easiest time to do it. It's much easier to mark it and everything before you put it together. And plus, if you do it now, then you can hide the tongs from the brads that you use to attach the hinges. You can hide those with paper on the other side. So I think, you know, you can put it together and then try to figure out where your hinges go. But for me, that seemed to work the best. And I'm just going to show you, this was kind of my proof of concept piece, that when I was playing around with the pattern and trying to work out all the measurements and things like that, I think it's easy for you to see where I've put the hinge. So you want to put it in between a shelf, and the pattern comes with 3 shelves. Of course, you can make more if you want, or less, but that seemed to give me a good proportion in the things that I put inside it to have 3 shelves. So basically, I tried to locate this hinge in between the top and the middle shelf. And so so you're going to want to try to, you can figure out here, okay, this shelf is going to go here, and you can even mark this with a pencil for yourself if that's helpful. You know, you can see where these are going to go based on how wide the coffin is and how wide the shelf is. And of course, you can trim these shelves down a little bit and, you know, shift them up or down where you want. And then this one's going to go about here. So you kind of know that, okay, somewhere in here, somewhere in this section is where my hinge needs to go. And then I want to point out to you the direction of the hinge. So you're going to have your hinge part out. This little part is going to be out. And what you want to do is mark it to go on the inside of this. So if I figure that my shelf is here, right here, and this shelf is about right there, and this is going to fit right along here, my hinge needs to be somewhere inside here. So I'm just going to pick a spot that I think is there and mark it. Now, what you want to do is, what I did is I poked the holes here, and then I put it up against the other side, and then used it to poke the holes on this side, and that way I got a perfect match across each side of the apothecary. Okay, now I've got my hinges on, and you can see the prongs are on this side, so that when we get the coffin put together will be covering the outside, and then that will hide these prongs. I kind of used big brads because I'm out of the little ones that I used in the sample, but you don't need to use brads this big. You could use something much smaller, but the holes will accommodate quite a big brad, as you can see. So anyway, I next will start by gluing these in place, and I'll start with these pieces, and you'll just want to put some glue. I'm just using glossy accents on the edge of my coffin. Oh, too much there. And then I'm going to want to put this, make sure your bottom is flat, and then put this edge to this edge and hold that in place until it dries. Now you can see I have both of the lower sides glued in place. And another thing you might want to think about doing as you go along is I added another bead of glue to the back side here to give it extra support, because it's all going to get covered and you won't see it. So that's kind of maybe something you might want to do as you go along. The next thing we're going to do is glue the bottom piece on, and that's going to help support these two pieces. So just as before, I'm going to run some glue along this edge. My finger to get rid of any excess. Place this down and then put the bottom up to the edges, making sure that you're square with both of these pieces, the side bottom pieces, and just hold that until it dries. Now I'm going to put the two upper sides on, and once again I'm going to put my glue on these edges. Now with these pieces, you may need to, you'll notice the long pieces on the top, so if you get confused, that's how it works. So I'm going to do like I have on the others, but with this one, you may need to press in just slightly. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing there, but I'm pressing in just slightly. So this is going up here, but I'm also pulling this in just a little bit, this piece, to make these fit really nicely. So you're going to kind of slant the coffin sides in just a little bit. And of course you'll want to hold that there until it dries, and then you'll do the other side. Now the last piece is the top, and the longer edge goes on the bottom. So last thing, add your glue. And it is really important that each section dry, so as you're adding things and, you know, adjusting the pieces as you put them on, that it doesn't fall apart. So I'm going to put it on the bottom here, and you may need to, I don't know if you can see it ever so slightly, I'm moving out those top pieces so that they fit nice and flush to these pieces, so they fit flush to this. And then I'll just hold that in place till it dries. And then, as I mentioned before, you know, it's probably a good idea to add some glue to the seams on the outside to help hold it in place. Now that you have the shell of the coffin put together, you can add your shelves. I start with this one here, and you notice I'll just bend this out just a little bit, and it fits really nice and snugly. So you might want to test your shelves first and decide if you want to trim any of it off on the edge, just to, if it's not fitting right, if it's too big. But I put them all in first just to double check, and you can kind of find where they want to sit. And like I say, you know, cut them bigger, but don't cut them too small. And so, you know, I trimmed a little bit off of this one. I thought it came up too high. And then once you're satisfied with your shelves, you'll want to glue them in place. You'll glue on each side and in the back, and then put them inside. You'll notice too that the shelves are slightly shallower than the coffin itself, and that's just to be sure that if there's something that you're putting on here that the shelves didn't interfere with it. Now, depending on what you decide to do for your doors or what you decide to put in here, of course you can always make your shelf bigger than the pattern has it and have it come further out, or cut it deeper in if you need to. So once you get these shelves glued into place, you've got the basic coffin put together. Next, I'm going to paper the outside, and that's going to cover up all the seams. It'll cover up these prongs and pretty everything up. And the way I do it, just very easy. I just glue the paper on without cutting it. That's going to hide all the extra glue and any little foibles that you have. Excuse you, Sandy. That's the puppy. So I'm going to put the straight edge of the paper up against the hinge because that's would be very hard to cut around that. So I'm going to position this right along the edge of the coffin, right along the edge of that hinge, and then bend it up here at the top. And just press all that down. And I would let that dry a little bit, but just for the purposes of the tutorial, I'm going to keep going. And then I just come in with my scissors. Actually, these are the scissors I use to cut that thick chipboard. It's Ionic from Tim Holtz. And I just cut along my edges. Remember, we already papered the top and the bottom, and just cut along there. And now, whoop, my shelf is not dry yet. And now I have the side paper. Now I'll go and do the same thing for this side, and then I'll do the back the same way, and that'll be last, and then that'll cover all this up. Okay, now I've got everything papered. And then the next thing that I did is I came in on the edges that are paper meeting paper. I just used an ink pad, black ink pad, just to go in and ink those edges. And then on the edges where it's fat, in the front here, I came in with a Sharpie and just colored all that in. That was, since it's such a fat area, it's just easy to come in with a Sharpie and do that. And I do that all the way around and on the shelves as well. One of the things I meant to mention to you when I was talking about putting these hinges on is you might want to consider gluing the hinge down and using the brads. My brads are really fat, so there's not a whole lot of movement of the hinge. But if your brads are smaller and the tongs don't fit really tight within the holes, you might get some shifting around. So if you glue that down, you can prevent that from shifting. Now, when you get ready to do the next step, you kind of have to make up your mind what order you should go in based on what you're going to do. And I'll go through what I did for this specific sample if this is exactly what you want to do. But if it's not and you're going to make some changes, just keep in mind that you need to make some decisions about what you're doing to the inside and what you're doing to your doors so that you do it in an order that you don't have problems. So for the doors, I use these chipboard ravens. And, you know, I kind of played with how I wanted to position them. I looked at it maybe this way or maybe having them facing out. And then I just kind of liked this offset idea here where they're, I guess they're facing each other, but where one is higher than the other. And there was no particular reason for that other than I just liked it that way. You can do however you want. The only thing you need to consider is if you're going to do feet on the bottom or no feet, then just consider how far this goes off the bottom so that you have room if that's an issue. Now, other options for doors is you could use something like this. These are chipboard gargoyles, so you could use these as your door and have them overlap if you want to. Another thing is this chipboard bat. You could use this, and then, of course, you would cut this right down the middle, and then it would open up as your door. So that's a couple other ones if you want something besides the ravens. Now, I kind of worked on the doors and the inside of the coffin simultaneously. First, I covered the ravens with paper, the inside of the paper is something from the paper pad that I've been using for the rest of it. And on the outside, I have this paper that comes from my Apothecary collage sheet or digital image set. And it kind of has this writing on it. It's just a piece of paper that's in the set. And it has something that looks like alchemy or apothecary type writing. And so I thought that would look cool on the outside. Now, I glued the paper on, and then I came in with a pair of scissors and cut just as close as I could to the edge of the chipboard. And then after I'd done that, I came in with, you know, you can either use sandpaper, or if you have sanding tools, just go in there and sand off that excess paper that that you can't cut quite to the edge to. And then after I was done with that, and I did that on both sides, then I came in, you can probably see this darker area, and it kind of antiqued it around the edges. So I came in with a Vintage Photo Distress ink and just inked all of that area to hide all the sanding and the whiteness of the edge of the paper, and just to make it look older. So, and while I was doing that, then at the same time I was working on the inside of this coffin and making the things for it. Now, one of the things that I decided in how I was going to do the doors is I wanted to be able to hide the tongues of the brads, just like we did on the side here. So what I did next is I went ahead and figured out where my holes were going to be in the ravens. And this is probably the trickiest part because it's not like a regular door where you can kind of figure out where the holes are going to be. I mean, these are going to be in a very specific position, and like, how do you mark all this? So what I did is I used just some sticky dots, you can see here, and I put them on, being careful not to cover the holes, and I figured out where I needed that raven to be. And after I did that, I just pinched it and kept it. The sticky helped keep it in place. I don't know if you can see this. And then I came in and marked my holes. And because you've got this, the hinge part of it here, this part is not going to lay flat against your raven. There's going to be a little bit of a gap there because your raven is actually going over the door. So then I was able to pull that off very easily and not damage anything. And now I've got the holes on my raven. So now I can poke the holes in my raven and I know where the brads are going to go. So when I eventually put the raven onto the coffin, pull that off so I don't stick it on anything else. When I actually eventually put this on the coffin, I'm going to be putting the head of the brad through here, and the tongs are going to be on the outside. So now I know where those tongs are going to end up, and now I know that that is something I need to cover in my design of what I put on the bird. And so you can see on the sample here, this is Dresden, and it was gold, but I painted it black and then went over it with a little Inca gold gilder's paste. And then I added this little wheel from a collage sheet, and then these eyes on top of that. And I did that separately as a separate piece. And I kind of figured out where it would go so that it would hide those tongs. And I will have these eyes sized for you to fit this wheel and this if you want to do it exactly this way. And of course I needed 2 for those. And while I was working on that, I also took these little filigree pieces and glued feathers. Now these feathers came from the craft store, and I can't remember if it was Michael's or Joann's craft store, but that's where I found these kinds of feathers. I didn't cut them this way. That's the way they came. So, I made all these pieces separate. That way I could assemble it once I put the ravens onto the coffin. Then a couple other things that I did, I used these little, show you, it's like a little mask. It comes in a set, chipboard masks, and there's all kinds of little masks in here. They're all really cute. And so I cut it in half and used 1/2 on one side, 1 on the other side. I painted it, and then I filled the eye hole with stickles. I think it was a black diamond stickles. And then for like the needly things here, it's just pine needles from a tree in my yard. And what I did was I picked them green and then painted black, and then I would suggest that you coat that with Mod Podge or something, just so as it dries out it won't fall apart. And then those are just glued underneath. So before I went ahead and attached my ravens to the box, I went ahead and did this part because it wasn't in the way of where I was going to put the prongs in. So I went ahead and did that. And then, but I held off on doing these two pieces, but I did lay out how the hands would work with the bottles in them. And let me turn it over so that you can see that each of these skeleton hands are holding a bottle with this little skeleton bead as a stopper. And so I kind of had to figure out where those were going to be so that they would hang off the edges so that you could close the coffin, or could close the doors on the coffin. So that's what I mean by kind of figuring out what is your raven going to look. Make sure you do something that covers those prongs, and then just make sure that once you put it together, all this stuff that you're putting on it is not going to keep you from opening or closing the coffin doors. So like I say, I've got this papered. I've got the holes marked and punched for both of these. And so the next thing I did was I went ahead and attached these to the door, or to the coffin. So they're just papered and attached. Like I said, I went ahead and stuck those on, but you don't have to do that. You can put them on whenever you want. And then I left all these other pieces aside while I worked on the inside of the coffin and creating all the bits and bobs. The fun part, I think, of the whole thing, creating all the little stuff that goes inside. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the inside here. And one of the things that I did at first is, even though these shelves are glued in place and they're pretty sturdy, this was probably more so than anything because it's in this angle, but I also put something on each shelf that was a wedge between, so that something here would support this shelf and something here would support this shelf. So if you look at this bottle down here, this bottle is tall enough to wedge right in between the shelves. The same thing is true of this bottle here, and then this book here also wedges between here and here. So that just kind of gave it a little extra support, and that way I didn't worry, depending on what I was going to put inside, if it was going to be a problem being too heavy. Now the first thing that I did was, I have a new collage sheet of various potion bottles, and I made these with the idea that I would use these as the background so that I could make it look fuller and all. If I would come in here, and I ended up putting in a bunch of these bottles in the background, which I don't know how well you'll see it in the camera, but in real life you can see it. And I just popped those up from the back of the coffin and just put all these little bottles inside here. Now the sheet, a lot of the bottles on the sheet fit in here in this size coffin, but of course you could use it for another project. I did go ahead and make a digital set of them too, but with the digital set, it has all of these labels, but it also, or all these bottles, but it also has blank ones. So you could use them and put your own labels on them, or you could use them for something completely different, like as a perfume bottle or something else that has nothing to do with Halloween. So that was the first step that I did, was go in there and put all those popped up bottles in there. And then I came in with actual bottles and other interesting things. And I'll start here at the top and point everything out to you. Of course, I've used this gargoyle bead here, and I put stickles, little red stickles in the eyes. And then you see I've got some potion bottles. Now, Alpha Stamps is carrying a whole bunch of these tiny little bottles, very cute bottles, and the one that you see colored there are ones that I colored using alcohol inks. So I used like pesto and ginger and butterscotch. I also used red pepper for one of the bottles. So I colored some of them, I left some of them clear, just depending on what I wanted to do. And then if you look at this bottle here, I actually dripped wax on it. I just buy little tiny birthday candles and dripped wax on it. And then you can see this potion bottle here has an owl glued to the front of it, and this one's got a little skull. And some of them I left the stoppers in, and then this here is like a candle holder, and I started with something that looks like this, except it was smaller. It was a gold, and I glued I think you can see in here, I glued a little jump ring to the side of it and then put the candle in it so it looks like a candle with a holder. And then here you can see I took a lot of images from collage sheets and I just wrapped them up into scrolls and tied them with ribbon, and then inked the edges and stuff and put that inside there. And of course I've added labels and things like that to the bottles. And then if you go down to the next row, you see more bottles. Now this particular bottle, the one I'm pointed to here on the end, it looks like this. And you can actually put another bottle inside of it. So that's what I did. I don't think it was this one, it was another little one I have. But I actually put the bottle inside there and then put the cork in. So it's a bottle within a bottle. And then you can see this bottle here is painted green, and then I stuck one of these guys, these tiny little gargoyles on as the lid. And then you can see this is a darker bottle. You can see you can see the little bit of the black of another bottle there, another rolled up scroll. Then you go down to the next row, and I've got this particular one. I might have fuzzies in here. I have this little cup. You can see that cup. And I filled it with wax inside, and then I glued a cat's eye thing on the front of it. And then you can see I've got a couple more bottles, and then that's an eye bead, and then a book, and I'll come back to the book at last because I'll show you how I did that. But there's a book, and then this, again on this shelf, we got another rolled up scroll. We got it's a little bead, a skeleton bead. Then we've also got this is a bead cap, and a glass bead here, or glass ball, excuse me. So that would be sort of like a, magic ball or whatever you call it. And then crystal ball. And then behind it, you've got a bunch of books. So I'm going to show you how I did the books and then how I did this big book sitting up. So Alpha Stamps has got a couple of collage sheets that have these really teeny little miniature books on them. And so what I did is I cut out a bunch of those books. I actually ran it through my Xyron machine, and it just so happens that foam core is exactly the width of the spine on most of these books. So to make this really fast, I just put these right on the foam core. Then I came in with my ionic scissors, which will cut through this stuff, and cut it out. Now you're not going to see the top of the book, you're not going to see the sides of the book. You know, you're really basically seeing the spine. So I inked the edges and then just glued all the little books inside of and that was just a fast way to do it. If you were going to see more of this, I might have done something a little bit different, but that was just so fast and simple to make up a whole bunch of books to fit into the apothecary. And then, you know, they also have a bunch, I've cut all these up because I've used a bunch of them, but they've got a bunch of you know, small labels and things like that for these tiny little bottles that are really cute. And you can see here is the wheel that I used, and little tiny tags and little pieces of paper that you could roll up. So there's lots of little stuff that fit a project this size. And then on the book, this book is actually just a piece of wooden book. And I started by painting it, the part you're going to see. You're not going to see the back because it's kind of propped up inside there. I just used an acrylic paint, a brown paint, and then I came in with some off-white paint and just dry brushed on, so it kind of looked more like pages. And then to the center of this, I glued this image. Now I'll have this image for you to download because it's sized perfectly to fit the book. And what I suggest you do is print it more than once. And the first one, glue the first one completely down into the book for the first page. Then take the same page, and you're not going to completely glue it down. So the next page, glue the center and a little bit down on the edges, but not all the way, so that the second set of pages is not completely glued down. So you can kind of see the dimension of the pages, and then do that one more time. So the first set is glued down completely. The second one is almost glued all the way down, but leave the ends free and not glued down. And then the last one here, glue that on, and just glue the center part. And let me see if I can get this at a good angle here where you can see that these pages are in here, they're loose on the edges. And then I just glued that in there propped up. So once I had everything inside the coffin, the next thing that I did was go ahead and attach the doors. So we'll go back to what we were talking about a little bit ago. I came in here, put my raven doors on here, and then I added the rest of the embellishments, covering up the brads. I put on my hands, put on my eyes, all that kind of stuff. And then I did a couple more things. On the side here, I put some sconces, or I guess it would be like a candelabra or something. And I've got a hand as the base, and then this is just chipboard, same chipboard I used to make this. And then I put a little bit of sticker on there, and then this little charm, skeleton spider charm, and then these candles, which are cut out from one of my carnival collage sheets, and I did that on both sides. And then the last thing that I did after getting all that on is putting this piece on the top, this I guess it's like a bat, I would say a bat embellishment, and then I did the feet. Now, Alpha Steps did get a few of these, but I think they only got like 5 of them. So another alternative, they do have a couple of different large bat pieces like this that I think would also look cool. So if you're not able to get that piece. Then for the feet, I used, let me pull this back some. I used these beads. And I used 4 of these. I painted them black, then used the Inca Gold, just wipe it on with your finger, and then put the cat's eyes in here, same cat eye I used on the cup, and then glued them to the bottom of the coffin. So that took care of the feet. And I do want to mention one other thing to you. You're going to notice when you do your coffin that it kicks back slightly, but that's okay. That's fine. That's what it's supposed to do, and it'll stand up just fine. So those are the feet and the topper and the sides and the ravens. And remember that I will have the little eyes for you sized for this. I will have the little insert for the book for you. I'll have the template as well online on my blog, so you want to be sure to go there. If you're coming from YouTube, then you want to be sure to jump over to my blog and download all this stuff for your project. And if you're on my blog watching this, well, you're already there. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a lot of fun making this cute apothecary, and also maybe having fun using the template to make the coffin for other reasons. So thanks, and have fun.